This is your host, Ronnie Fernandez, LCSW, licensed clinical therapist and owner of Ronnie Fernandez Therapy, but for guys. If you want to know more about me and my private practice, go to ronniefernandez.com. Hello and welcome to Mindset, the Guy podcast, where men talk about their life challenges and how they were able to overcome them. My goal with this podcast is to help men better express their thoughts and develop a mindset to better deal with their life challenges. This podcast is not clinical therapy. The men that I interview are not my clients, but have great stories on how they were able to develop a mindset to conquer their challenges. I'm not a professional interviewer or host, so please forgive me for all the pauses, and misplaced words. With that being said, let me introduce you to my next guest. All right, Mark. I want to thank you for joining me in the podcast and being willing to share your story. Me and Mark actually worked together a couple years back. We've known each other for about 7 years, and Mark was always telling me about his daughter and the relationship that they have, and there's also he actually wrote a book about the experience, and I just really thought it was important for guys that are going through relationship issues, parenting issues with their mother, because it's a big thing. So I want Mark, if you go ahead and talk a little bit about your book, and we'll follow up with the questions.
First, it's cool to see you again, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Like you said, we and Ronnie, we've known each other for a few years now. We were working with families and children, and it was some rough situations, but we endured, and I think partly, because we, the whole group there, I think we really wanted good things for the children, and as a father, Ronnie, that's all I really want to be as a good father for my child, right? And at a certain point, I realized that that was not going to happen unless I took some definitive steps. And what I mean by that is, once my child's mother and I, once we left as a couple, I realized that as I write in the book, My Daughter's Keeper, that her feelings were becoming bruised, or they had been bruised, and she didn't. And I think as a lot of mothers, when they get in that state, when they get in that mindset, they want to interrupt the father's relationship with the child. And I saw that, emerging. I saw her narrative around me, that I wasn't a good father. And so I saw these things emerging. So I decided that, it was important for me to take definitive steps. And what I did was, I decided that I was going to go and, apply for and decree my parental rights. And it was a big step for me to do that for a couple of reasons. One, because, of the historical relationship that men of color have with the courts. I didn't really want to have my relationship with my daughter play out in that arena. And, secondly, personally, I'd known, friends and family that had went through that. And it was a pretty tall mountain to climb. So, I tried at first to, sort of mitigate matters, through conversation, through compromise. I say compromise, things that I know that as a father, things I know I should just naturally have a certain amount of time. I started to compromise with that, but then at a certain point, I realized that I don't have to do that to have a relationship with my daughter. So I initiated action, and as a result of the court action, which was extensive in terms of the time, I was able to get my daughter back into my life, because it was a period of time, as I write in the book, that I didn't see her for about 3 months. She was out of my life. My child's mother had filed an action that was a stay-away order, and that affected my ability to see my daughter for about 3 months. And so once I got, but the lucky thing is, and this is something that I say to men that I work with who are going through this, that once you see that the relationship that you're in is not going to be fruitful any longer, and you're going to part, and there's a child in the matter, you have to go and apply for your parental rights. Now, if you're married, that's automatic, right? You're known as a father, and you get certain rights. You still have to go in and discuss how that breakdown is going to happen. But if you're not married, you first have to go establish yourself as the father, which I had to do, and then you apply for a visitation. So luckily, I did that before the stay away order came, and so everything was bundled into my action. And, after several months of going through that, I was awarded a very handsome visitation, and I had my daughter back in my life.
How long? How long was the process between when you filed the paperwork to when you finally were able to get your daughter in full custody?
It was probably about 6 months.
6 months.
It was about 6 months, maybe a little bit longer than that. Now I know for some people who go through this, that may seem like not a long time, because I joined a couple of fatherhood groups in the process, and I'll talk about why I did that in a moment. But so it was 6 months from the time that I filed to the time that the judge gave her final decision on the matter. And it was but everything is relative, though, right? So for me, that 6 months seemed like 60 years, because part of that time, my daughter, who I had seen every day, we watched television, we played, I helped her study, we read together. All of those things were gone, and as a father, I felt really like I had suffered a death, right? And so in that process of feeling that way, I think that I experienced all the stages of grief when you're going through death, right? And I realized at a certain point that, now going back to me finding a support group, I realized at a certain point that I couldn't stay in that place. I had to find an environment where I can go and be around men or individuals who were going through the same thing I was going through, so I can have I can get their insight. I can talk and not have someone not fully understand what I'm going through, or someone give me their input based on just feeling angry that this is happening to me, which as family and friends, that's natural. That's that's how they're gonna feel. But I couldn't stay in their space, because I made a decision that in order for me to get through this, I had to operate from a place of love for my daughter, love that I know one day that we would be reunited. And so when I went to these fatherhood groups, I experienced that energy that I needed to sustain and come through that darkness.
How did you know you needed to join a group? Like, what were some of the red flags for you?
Isolating, spiraling down a path of just negative thoughts, delusional thoughts that maybe my child is over in Europe somewhere. Maybe I never see her again. The things that were natural, thoughts that are natural when you were separated from someone, began to amplify, and amplify in the sense that I began to let my thoughts just wander, and then I just didn't want to be around anyone. I was irritable. I was sad. Had mood swings. Thought I was pregnant or something. But I knew, Ronnie, that I knew I needed to talk with someone. And I didn't want to necessarily do it on an individual basis, man, because, for me, my wife's a therapist. I respect therapy, but it's hard for me to express myself as a lot of men do, initially one-on-one. But I knew if I was in a group and I didn't necessarily have to talk right away, and I could listen, because partly what I needed was to hear from other men that were going through this, and hear their stories of, even if it was, momentarily having moments of triumph, or, sustained triumph. I just needed to be in the company and the energy, and that sort of energy. But eventually, what happened was, being in that space, I began to talk. I began to feel I had a permission to talk. I began to feel I had a right to express these feelings of doubt, feelings of fear, like I wouldn't be around my daughter again, or I didn't want the fear of not going to court because of, again, the historical relationship with the court and men of color. So I was able to confront a lot of these sort of reservations that I had about moving forth with the energy and resolve that I needed in order to get my daughter in my life. So that's how I knew, right? I knew that I was spiraling down, and I knew I couldn't continue down that rabbit hole, or I would never really get to the point where I could have the strength to get my daughter back in my life.
Yeah, I mean, all those symptoms are very common with men. I think when we think of of like depression, or when we think about sadness, we think that, okay, something's wrong, and we're gonna be sad all the time. We're gonna be moping around, and for many cases for men, it looks differently. And it's what you said: irritability, isolation. You don't do things that you used to do. So those are very common symptoms especially for loss. And then we had to kind of change the way we were thinking of it kind of being weak. It has to be more of like, yeah, you're not seeing your daughter. How are you? You mean like it would be I don't know, say wrong, but it would be different if you didn't have these emotions.
Sure.
How could you not? You have a great loss. And so, I just thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's a big deal to normalize that. How were you? And I know you went to the groups and stuff. Were there other people that helped you along the way, or anything that really helped you?
Well, I think my family was very helpful. Even though they were in their emotions a lot, which is natural. Right? They saw their brother, they saw their son, their nephew, their cousin, my friends. They saw me in this place that they knew was unhealthy for me to be in, and they were upset that because they knew the closeness that I share with my daughter. They knew that they felt angry because I didn't have my daughter in my life. So they were there, they were supportive, but I had to be careful, and I talk about this in the book because we have a certain amount of real estate in our mind, right? And if we occupy that real estate with anger, it won't have room to really hear other ideas and to receive other suggestions and guidance. So if I allowed myself to be in the space that my family was in, and I'm not saying they were wrong for being there because they love me, even going to the groups, I wouldn't have been able to hear with a clear mind some of the things that the other fathers and men were talking about. They were talking about, being hopeful. They were talking about giving very practical things on how to approach the court. And so these suggestions were very helpful to me. One of the things that, suggestions that resonated was how I approached the court in terms of my emotionality and my intonation when I talk. And I talk about this in the book. I was warned to be very careful not to go into court and let your emotions show or speak your emotions the way you're feeling your emotions, right? Because it would automatically give credence to the narrative that you're a dangerous man, right?
Yeah.
And so that was something that I had to be very mindful of. And it would have been very difficult for me to do that, Ronnie, if I went into court with the anger that I was feeling. So I had to put that anger in a place where it belonged. And that's, when I say where it belonged, I meant that it was there. I had to recognize it was there, but I couldn't let it be the guide of this process I was going through.
Yeah, and that's big inside information, especially that you're able to gather from that group. And you're not going to get that information anywhere else. But it's true. We're people of color, and we have to be very aware of how we present ourselves. I know it might be kind of taboo to say, but it's true. and it's this is the information that we would tell friends.
Right.
You know, of you're going to be judged on the way that you look and the way that you hold yourself, and I yeah, that's amazing that you're able to go to that group and find that support.
Yeah, you know, and it was, and this is why, you know, I say in the book, and this one I just deal with, you know, men and fathers in general. I said you have to be able to get outside of whatever sort of societal definition that you have as a man, and that definition normally is that, you know, as a man you can make it happen. We were talking about this a little earlier, you and I, Ronnie, that you make things happen. You're a man, you know. Here, you're lost. Here's a map. No, I don't need the map sort of mentality or thinking. At a certain point, if you see that you're stuck and you see that you can't move, and it's and you're missing out on something that you have a right to as a father, or just, you know, the kind of life that you deserve, you have to have the intestinal fortitude to man up and go get help, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So,
yeah.
And so whether that help be a group help or individual counseling therapy, you have to really face that moment and say, okay, you know, look, I'm stuck and I don't want to be stuck. And if I do this, I won't be stuck anymore. And it's a simple equation. And so I came to that realization, and that's why, you know, I joined the group. And honestly, also I went individual therapy as well. And I think it was those two, you know, dynamics, those two support systems that really helped me, along, again, with my family. She wasn't my wife at the time, my girlfriend and fiance. She helped me a great deal. Her support was just, you know, I can't measure the degree of support that she gave me. But the bottom line is that I knew that I couldn't do it by myself. Right. I knew if I tried to do it by myself, what was going to happen was I was going to end up not having my daughter in my life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as men we have to look at it differently than asking for it. I mean, we're definitely asking for help, but you know, we had talked about earlier is we see it as a journey of like, how are you going to conquer? You know, if you want to go with the old stories, fairy tales is conquering this dragon, right? Of like, okay, you can't do it by yourself. You know, all the great stories. It wasn't just one person slaying the dragon. They had help on the way.
Right.
You know, and being able to accept that help is huge. And for men, I think you have to be more aware of the symptoms of like, am I isolating myself? Am I having a lot of negative talk? Am I being irritable? And then being able to understand, look, I'm not going down the right path. My thinking is extremely negative.
Right.
And exactly what you did is get yourself around positive people that have been through the same kind of experience.
Right.
And tell me about how your now wife was able to help you. You know, I mean, that's pretty amazing. You're able to find someone to be support, because sometimes with this podcast, wives or girlfriends listen. And what are some of the things that worked for you?
Well, she's a therapist now, so she was almost there. She helped me to stay accountable. She gently reminded me when I was, you know, doing the blame game and not looking at my own contributions to, you know, why things landed up where they were. And I talk about this in the book, that you have to be accountable, right, for your actions and you know, face things that you've done to contribute to a certain dynamic. And she helped me to, you know, to really, when I was going off of that path of understanding, she helped gently nudged me back on it.
Yeah.
Right. And that gentle nudge, I think, was important, because I think at a certain points when I was in a certain space of not wanting help, not wanting to, you know, to listen to anyone, if I would have felt pressure to face my own demons, to face my own, you know, to be accountable, I probably wouldn't have done it. I probably out of spite would have just like, shot my own self in the foot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not listening to this BS. But she was very wise in that, she would look at, the space I was in and step in that space in a way that was helpful for me. But she didn't back down though. When I was doing things that was counter to what I knew should happen, she was very adamant about it. So her being adamant, I think, was very helpful. And so I think that sort of support and understanding that, being able to understand that I was going through what I was going through and helping me, feel comfortable, talking to her. And sometimes that, that comfort was just her not saying anything, just letting me talk, right? But just knowing that there was a lot of emotions going on and encouraging me to, find spaces where I could go. She encouraged me a lot as well to go find the support groups. So I talk about that in the book. Actually, I don't specifically talk about that, but I do, I say that when someone asks me, what do you hope, for this book? I say, I hope that it's a source of hope for men who are going through this and understanding for women, right? And the understanding part is that, your guy may not be expressing what he's feeling because of, his reservations as a man not to express certain things. So just know he's going through these things and help him in a way that will help, guide him or help to buoy him through these moments. And if there's a mother on the other side of the courtroom and you see that there's a good father, standing there, just understand that, don't interfere with that. He might have been not a good partner, but if he's a good father, let that experience happen. So I think with my now wife, I think she kind of got all of these things, right? So she really helped me to process through a lot of negative moments.
Yeah, so it's definitely supporting, but also kind of balancing it where she's holding you accountable to very gently and gently.
I'm a man. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? I got this. I don't need that map.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, just being able to have that balance, because I think a lot of women, sometimes they just want to be, everything's going to be okay, and just kind of let the husband do him. And, guys also need that encouragement, that kind of like holding them accountable too, sure. When they go down that negative road, because it's very easy to go down there. And so it's that balance of nurturing, but yet, being the one there to kind of like, look, you need to get some help. Yeah. You're irritable now. You're not doing the things you used to do. So, no, absolutely.
And I think that, I like the word balance because I think she definitely recognized that certain things I needed to experience, myself, certain negative thoughts that, that I was sort of stuck in. She needs to, she sort of, there are times I could tell she kind of let those thoughts play out and let me come to the realization that I can't keep going down that road. But then, if she saw me going down that road too far, she would, sort of help to bring me back.
Yeah.
So I think balance is a very key word in there. And I think so if there are women out there listening that inherits a man going through this, I think some of these things, would be helpful to employ in your dealing with that gentleman. But I think balance, as Ronnie said, I think is key though.
Yeah. What would you tell a guy that's going through this? What kind of advice would you give him?
I would say that, one, just start from the framework that, you are a father and you have a right to be a father. You have a right to all your emotions that you're feeling, but you also have responsibility. And those responsibilities are to make sure that you stay in your child's life. So with that understanding, there's going to be certain things that you have to do, right? You may have to face your fears about going to court if you don't want to do that. You may have to seek help and slaying this dragon that's in front of you, right? You may have to and that help may come in the form of group support, individual support. You may have to deal with your very, I'm not going to say over exaggerated, but deal with your feelings of extreme anger for the mother. You may have to put that in its proper place. So there's a lot of work that you're going to have to go through. But as I put in front of me, I put the concept of love in front of me going through this. And that love was, I love my daughter, and I'm going to have to do things that I necessarily did not think I would have to do, right, to be in her life. And so I would just encourage fathers just to, if you're going through this, just get ready and don't isolate, and just let love sort of guide you through the process.
Yeah, and it's very important to kind of keep focused, because you can go down those rabbit holes.
Yeah, you can, and it's easy, man. It's very easy to do, because
absolutely.
you're sitting. I remember one day I was sitting around watching The Rock. It was some movie he did when he was a father, and he had, I don't know, this daughter he didn't know, but kind of came in his life, and he was trying to, be a father, and it wasn't, he was going through divorce. That wasn't happening. It was this new girl in his life, his daughter, and I was sitting around, I was watching it, man, and all of a sudden, I just started to cry, man, like I was a newborn baby, man.
Yeah.
My wife was looking at me. Well, she wasn't my wife then, and we were there with her two daughters, and they were looking, and I realized at that point, man, that I was going through this extremely emotional moments, man, and if I didn't, pursue it in the right way, that I was just going to be no good. And so I made the decision, the hard decisions for me, because one, I wasn't the kind of guy that just liked to talk to people, man. I mean, I like that. My job is to talk to people, but I like to talk to people about myself. Right?
Yeah.
I can listen and extract information from you very easily, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very sympathetic, and it's real. I'm a real person. But, that free exchange, I don't reciprocate very easily.
Yeah.
And so I had to, go back to your last question, some things that you had to do. I had to face the things that I didn't want to do, and I didn't think I had to do. And so those were things that I did. So yeah.
This is the last question.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I said now where things are like, we see challenges, we see things that bring us anxiety and some situations that leads to depression, but there's also another side of that, is that when we do overcome this, and we do, we are successful, or it is passed, we somehow get stronger. What are some of, how is that true in your situation, that you feel that you became stronger in that way, and how?
Absolutely. One of the things it really firmly taught me, going through the groups, going through the therapy, it taught me that, these things are momentarily. These things happen in moments, right? They're not forever, right? And if you confront whatever situation you're in, if you're specifically in my situation, if you confront it in a way that's proactive, that's self-accountable, and that is coming from a place of love, as I did, and being open, you can get through that moment, right? But what happens is often we get stuck in that moment, and we don't do what we should, and so that moment leads into the next moment, and then that next moment leads into another moment, where if we just would have confronted it and dealt with it at that time, and did it and handled it in a way that you muster the strength that you have in you, and that you bring out the things that are in you to deal with these type of things, you can transcend and you can overcome. And the overcoming is great. It's beautiful, because once you're on the other side, right, you realize that those were just moments that you were dealing with. However tumultuous, however huge they were not the sum and totality of your existence, right? And that's something that many people have gone through, and you realize that, man. And so then you realize that life at the core of itself is good, right? It's good, and you can have happiness, right? And I think that me going through this and the way that I did, I realized I'm able to put things into a certain perspective now, that there's going to be hard times. But if I handle the hard times in a way that doesn't get me stuck in those hard times, I will overcome those hard moments, and I'll get back to where I and everyone else deserves to be, and that's happy. And so that's the place I'm in right now.
Yeah. That's great, Mark. Thank you, man. Wow, that was awesome. Thank you.